Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up today, Myrka Dellanos, is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, published author, professor of journalism, public speaker, entrepreneur. Her family fled Cuba in communism, and that's what we brought her on here to talk about. So, Myrka, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, especially to speak on these topics that are so timely nowadays.
So you have in Miami a gentleman whose parents fled Cuba because of communism, and now he's working on campaigns and canvassing and going door to door promoting socialism. How does someone get to that point, realizing, I mean, I know plenty of Cubans, they share their stories. No one's being quiet in the house about it. How does he get to that point? What would you tell him if you had 30 minutes with him at lunch?
Well, I think that I'm sure his family has had this conversation with him. I think sometimes what happens is you get around other people, you start hearing the message. Maybe you feel like you don't have enough money, or maybe you're someone that's had a cushy life in a way because your family works so hard. And you feel like this is the cool thing to do nowadays, to just hang out with other young people that say radical things. So maybe that's the case. I don't know him personally. That's something you would have to ask him. But that's why I posted yesterday specifically just asking the question. And I got so many comments because this is something very emotional, especially for
Right.
people that have fled communism, obviously. But I think that maybe the other day, Vice President Vance was speaking about the fact that if the economy is not fixed, in a way, that's the entrance point for a lot of young people to feed into the policy that, well, we don't have enough to eat, or it's not going well. And the Democratic Socialist Party is offering me all this free stuff. Now, we know how that ends. We know it doesn't work. We know it's a failed platform, but young people sometimes get brainwashed by these things, and they have no clue that they'll end up in poverty. I mean, what I'm surprised about is the fact that his own family doesn't even want to speak with their own name. They spoke only in anonymity. Why? Because I imagine that they're embarrassed about what this young man is doing.
One of the elements behind this, it seems to be, like, we know all kids rebel, right? This seems to be in many ways a rebellion against a lot of successful parents whose kids aren't achieving the same things.
With real stories.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't theory. This is real stories they're coming from.
Exactly. And I think one of the things is that the way that they start, in a way, indoctrinating you, and this is because my mom and my dad taught me this since I was a very little girl. And just now I just spoke about it with my mom, especially because I'm coming on here to be with you. And she was saying that they demonize people that do well in society. That's the beginning of it. So what happens is that all these people that maybe feel rejected, pushed aside, have not done so well, and they have families that have done very well, start thinking that these people are exploiting others in order to have their wealth. Now, that may be true in some cases, but in the majority of cases, people that amass wealth or that do well or that have entrepreneurial skills are because they've worked hard in society. They've given up time, they've studied, they've done what other people are not willing to do, and therefore they have a success that other people don't have. So if you can't just be jealous of people and then go ahead and say, poor me, and I need everything for free, that just doesn't work. Of course, at the beginning, this is what they want. All these DSA workers, all these DSA candidates, that's exactly what they want. They want to be able to give free stuff away. As a matter of fact, that's what they promise. That's now not how it ends up. If one thing we know for sure is that in socialism and communism, all the wealth they say they want to spread the wealth, right? But they actually don't. The country ends up in poverty. The people end up in poverty. And the elite, which are the people of the party, are the ones that end up being able to eat what they want in the private planes, having all sorts of mansions and everything else. They are the ones that amass the wealth. So if anything, that regime and that type of ideology is the most unfair of all. And it's actually evil. If you ask someone like me, after I've seen everything that happened with my family, my mom has never seen her sister again because her sister had to raise her children and her sister couldn't come over here. And my mom was not going to go back to Cuba, especially when she came out in exile. And when you say that you are leaving a country because of the communist regime, my mom felt like she never wanted to go back because that regime was still in place. My father died and he never saw a free Cuba. So of course, I'm going to continue to speak about this because it's evil. It's completely evil. At this point, it's right and wrong. It's that big of a difference.
So that I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't think people realize what happens to these families when they escape Cuba and come to the United States because of communism and socialism. And everybody has a story like that, right? They're just, when they leave, they don't see family again. Am I wrong on that?
Well, there's people that after they get their citizenship, they have gone back to Cuba. And that's something that's debatable because there's two sides of the story and then two schools of thought, which one is that you shouldn't go back to Cuba because you are giving money to the regime. Now, that is 100% true. But I do have compassion for people that have elderly parents or children that they left behind. And once they are able to, they do try to go back and see their family members. So I understand it and I have compassion for that. But there are other people that have seen the evil of the regime and this is completely black and white for me. I am never going back unless there's a free Cuba and they stand on that principle.
Well, there's a third element to that, though, too. I've heard from some folks working in Florida that if you're in key industries, government or technology or these kind of things, you got to be really careful about going back there because the regime still has an interest in you.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you something, you cannot go to Cuba without them knowing exactly what you're doing 24/7. As a matter of fact, many years ago, when I worked for the local station, I first worked for the local station in Miami for Univision, and then I worked for the network. But when I worked for the local station, the Cuban government knows exactly what everyone's doing. They have tentacles all over the world. Now, we know this for a fact, and I'll tell you why, because I was 23 years old and I went to cover a story and I went to the Cuban interest section in Washington, D.C., which is what they had. Obviously, they cannot have an embassy. When I walked in there because I wanted to ask some questions, there was a guy at the top of the stairs that said to me, "What are you coming here to do, Myrka? You're coming to bomb us?" And I was like, "What? How do you know who I am?" He's like, "We know everything." So they were in Washington, D.C. I worked for a local station at that point in Miami, and they knew exactly who I was. Why? Because our station would speak out against the communist regime. They know exactly what's going on. So if you go to Cuba, if I go to Cuba tomorrow, they're going to know that I'm a journalist. They're going to know my stance because I'm public about it. And they're definitely going to follow me. So anybody that tells you that they do things freely when they go to Cuba and that the government has no hand in it is lying to you. So it just doesn't make sense.
What role does you worked at Univision, NBC? You've had a prominent career as a journalist. What role does Spanish-speaking media in the United States play in this current debate on socialism and communism?
Well, that's a long answer. I'll try to answer it succinctly for you.
Thank you.
I'll tell you that when I began in the local station, we were very much pro freedoms, pro US, because it was the local Miami station.
Okay.
I'll tell you when I went on to the network as time passed, I would say in the last 10 years, there's definitely a bent towards the left. And that's why I was pulled off the air at NBC Telemundo at the end of last year.
Did they tell you? I mean, so I've had two former Telemundo anchors work for me, and one just said I quit because she was an anchor, and she did a story, and they literally were changing the verbiage of it on the teleprompter as she's doing
Absolutely.
it. They just said, I'm absolutely not doing this. You're not letting me be a reporter. Did they tell you that's why? Just like, no, we have a different editorial bent. How do they handle that with you?
Well, I'll tell you, when it first started, I came on an opinion show, which I had never done before. You know, we're taught as journalists, you don't give your opinion, right? But television has changed and journalism has changed. So I said, well, I'm going to take an opportunity. I had guest hosted on The View many years back. And we weren't discussing politics at that point. That was when Barbara Walters was still on and she invited me on. So at this point, I come on this opinion show and I specifically told the producer, you know, I am conservative. I have Christian biblical values. Therefore, I'm 100% pro-life. And I was explaining my stance on things. And he said, oh, absolutely. That's what we want. So they used my voice to promote the show, and it brought in ratings. And later, when we went through the election year, and I was seeing, so I hosted much, the first block, which was news, the hard news. And they had some pop culture and other things on the show. But I would moderate that first part. And when I started seeing the way they were framing some of the stories, well, obviously, as an anchor, I'm able to go into the rundown and I'm able to write and put things in my own language. Have always done this. At this point, what they started doing was limiting the fact that I could write my own scripts. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
So I went to my boss and I said, well, this isn't right. The way that this is written is incorrect. It's actually factually incorrect. You're actually lying to our audience. I cannot do that. He's like, well, you can fix it on air. I said, no, but I want to write the script correctly. So what I would do is give the facts, and then later we can speak about our opinions on these facts. I wanted to be very clear that I wanted to give the facts first and then have an opinion. What they started to do is they kicked me out of the rundown. They didn't let me write the scripts at all. And they would write things that were completely bent towards the left and against President Trump and against anybody that had any stance. So what I did was I would ad lib the scripts many times. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you something really simple that's outrageous to me. There was someone that was picked up by ICE and he was accused of raping children. And I said, the pedophile did this and this and this. You know what? Sorry. Sorry. My producer said to me in my ear, he's not a pedophile. He's only been accused of molesting children. I said, he raped children. It's already been announced that he is guilty of raping children. He is therefore a pedophile. She's like, no, you can't call him a pedophile. And I said, I will call him a pedophile. So it was things like that that started to boil up. And one time I just said, you know, all of you guys are bent towards the left and you're actually pulling me off of being able to write scripts or have anything to do with the scripts because of the fact that everyone here is bent towards the left and you're discriminating me. And because of that, I was sent to HR. I was pulled off the air for 10 days, et cetera, et cetera. And then eventually in the middle of my contract, I was called in one morning and just said, that's it. You're done. You're not going to be with us anymore. And I said, well, why? They said, oh, we're going a different direction. And obviously at this point, they don't have any conservative voices.
Last point before we let you go here, because this is something you keep hearing a lot from all of these pro-socialist, pro-communist kids. What's never been done before. Real socialism has never been done before. What's your answer to that as the last word?
That's not true. I mean, they have a narrative that they continue to spew out constantly, and just take a look at all the countries. If they say that, I also have people that comment all the time when I come out and speak and say, oh, socialism is not communism. Oh, give me a break. Of course it is. It is the gateway and it leads to that. And by the way, there was, I think I'm going to post on this in the next couple of days. There's a video where you can see Fidel Castro. And this is something my mom always told me. He always said, we are not communists. We are actually Christians. And they would wear crosses around their necks. So no, of course we are not communism. We want to help you. We want to help the people. We want the races to get along. They would pit the whites against the blacks. Can you imagine? Does it sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
So exactly. So he always said he wasn't a communist. And once he was in power on January 1st, he said, and by the way, we are communists and there is no God. So they will lie to you straight to your face. Do not believe what they're saying. This is very important for people to know. We're not dealing. I feel like Americans in this country are very used. This is a noble country. And they're used. I know politicians can embellish
what they're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. So they are going to lie to you, and they're eventually going to say who they are.
Thank you so much, Myrka Dellanos. I really appreciate having you on the program. I probably butchered your name a little bit, but that's as close as I'm going to get, and I thank you very kindly. Every time you have something, bring it back. We love having you here. Breaking Battlegrounds.
Thank you so much. Thank you.